Coming up, this week's Sneak Peek. I'm Shadoe Stevens, and it's time to unlock and unlatch the Vault of Wonder and find out what lies behind in this week's AT20 Sneak Peek. The three-man band from Berkeley, California called Green Day. Give a listen to Longview. That's a good one. Guitar Player magazine calls them three disaffected young men possessed of a howling energy. No kidding. That's true. That's the Berkeley, California trio known as Green Day. The song is Longview. They're new to radio, and that's why their song's our pick as this week's AT20 Sneak Peek.
Casey's Top 40.
Well, now we're up to the band called Green Day, and our look at the many meanings of the word green. It can mean anything from being naive to being committed to saving the earth. Green is also the color of the drummer's hair in the group that got us talking about the color green. Rocking out of the survey at number 37, here's the group Green Day with Basket Case.
Do you have the time? Casey's Top 40.
Well, now we're up to Green Day, a band whose debut album has sold over 3 million copies. But they say that won't change a thing in their lives. They'll still tour in a converted bookmobile and stay with friends on the road. Over the past year, Green Day has been hailed as one of the best musical acts to emerge from the 20-something generation. The people the media has dubbed Generation X. As with Beck and Lisa Loeb, Green Day sings about alienation and the difficulty living in a world of diminishing expectations. And like a lot of Generation X acts, the members of Green Day are not into the trappings of stardom. The limousines, big hotel rooms, fancy meals, and wild on-stage clothing. Billie Joe, Trey Cool, and Michael Pritchard say they're just people who make music, nothing more, nothing less. So even though their album Dookie has sold over 3 million copies, Billie, Trey, and Michael say they haven't changed one thing in their lives. They still tour in that old bookmobile, which they stripped down 2 years ago and converted into a touring bus. And the bus is still driven by Trey Cool's father. They stop that bus at fast food stands, eating lots of greasy junk food instead of going to healthy sit-down restaurants. Whenever possible, if they know anybody in a city where they're playing, they don't stay at a hotel. Instead, they just drop by and ask to sleep on the couch or the floor. That's how they are, and that's how they say they plan to stay. This week, the band that's adjusting to success by not adjusting at all climbs back up a notch to number 37 on Casey's Top 40. Here's Green Day with Basket Case.
To listen to me whine, counting them down with Casey Kasem.
Now we're up to the latest hit for Green Day, a successful band that's bringing back the punk rock sound and attitudes of the 70s. And now that they have money, they say in classic punk style, they don't know what to do with it. The punk rock movement got going in London in the late 70s with bands like the Sex Pistols, The Clash, and Generation X. Aside from their raucous music, they had an attitude that was totally anti-establishment. Punk rock bands didn't dress up to go on stage. They just wore whatever they had on at the time, and they proclaimed that nothing mattered to them but their music. Material possessions were just things that tied you down. The punk rock movement died down in the early 80s, but now in the 90s it's made a big comeback thanks to the huge success of the rock trio Green Day. The group's members, Billie Joe Armstrong, Mike Dirnt, and Trey Cool, have brought back the tough, in-your-face attitude of early punkers like Johnny Rotten, Joe Strummer, and Billy Idol. They usually walk on stage wearing old T-shirts, ripped jeans, and worn-out sneakers. Billie Joe has been known to do a song or two in his underwear, or even less. But now that their album Dookie has sold over 5 million copies, the cash is starting to roll in. And the three members of Green Day say that's become a bit of a problem. Billie Joe says, quote, "We have a lot of money. What are we going to do with it? My mother would always ask me what I wanted for Christmas. I'd always say nothing. What do I need?" Unquote. And Billie Joe adds that for a punk band, having money may be a bigger problem than not having it, because success and the punk attitude just don't seem to go well together. While the members of Green Day are sorting all that out, their CD keeps selling and their latest hit keeps climbing the chart.
Casey's biggest hits.
A year ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was by a group that single-handedly revived the nearly dead punk rock sound of the 70s. Back in the late 70s, a musical movement emerged from England led by bands like the Sex Pistols and the Clash. Their sound was stripped down to the basics with only a handful of guitar chords and angry lyrics that were screamed rather than sung. By the early 80s, punk rock was on its way out, and until a year ago, it was barely alive. And then a trio from the San Francisco Bay Area came along and hit big with the same in-your-face musical style that had made big waves back in the late 70s. And unlike most of those early punk rockers, they even hit the charts. A year ago this week, they had one of the biggest hits in the USA. Here's Green Day with When I Come Around.
I heard you crying loud. Casey's Top 40.
I'm David Perry, sitting in for Casey Kasem. Dropping 2 notches to number 16 are 2 former Sweet Children. At least that was the name of the band Mike Dirnt and Billie Joe Armstrong played in 11 years ago when they were in high school. These days, they've joined with drummer Trey Cool in the band Green Day. Here's their current hit, Time of Your Life, Good Riddance.
Top 40 Countdown.
I'm David Perry. Now we're up to Green Day, a band that once traveled 200 miles to audition for a record company, only to discover the place they were set to play didn't have electricity or a roof. Green Day got together back in 1983 in the Northern California town of Rodeo. That's when 2 11-year-old pals, Billie Joe Armstrong and Mike Dirnt, decided to try their hand at playing rock and roll. 4 years later, after adding drummer Trey Cool, they started playing their first paying gigs. For the next 2 years, Green Day played hundreds of parties and little clubs. And in 1989, they figured they were ready for a record contract. They set their sights on an independent label called Lookout Records and pestered Lawrence Livermore, the company president, for an audition. Though skeptical, Lawrence gave in and told Green Day if they traveled the 200 miles to Mendocino County, where the label was based, he'd listen to them play. Elated, the teenagers loaded up the old van and took off. But when they arrived, they got a nasty surprise. There was a terrible storm, and the tiny club they were supposed to play didn't have a roof. Not only that, there was no electricity. But the 3 teenage musicians weren't about to let that stop them. In the pouring rain, they plugged their instruments into a portable generator. And in front of a crowd of 12 curious neighborhood kids holding candles, Green Day auditioned. And the label president was so impressed with the group's talent and their persistence, he offered them a record contract right there on the spot. This week, nearly a decade later, Green Day is riding high with their 4th Top 40 hit.
American Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. These are the hottest hits by the hottest stars. Slipping 2 notches to number 37 is Green Day. In concert, their leader, Billie Joe Armstrong, often calls for a volunteer from the audience to come on stage and play Billie's guitar while Billie sings, giving the fan a shot at stardom.
American Top 20.
Hi, this is Casey Kasem. New on the survey last week was Boulevard of Broken Dreams by Green Day from their CD American Idiot. That album has earned 7 Grammy nominations and enthusiastic reviews, with critics comparing it to some of the greatest concept albums of all time. Is Green Day headed for superstardom? We'll find out as we count down all the hottest hits in the USA on American Top 20 from the premier radio networks.
The hits from coast to coast.
Thank you for tuning in. This is American Top 40. It originates in Hollywood, goes across America, and then all over the world, working our way to the biggest song in the USA. Now we're up to Green Day. We wondered, now that they're bona fide rock stars, how have their lives changed? Well, Mike Dirnt and Trey Cool were very quick to respond. Listen.
Well, my ears ring really loud at night, which I think is common of most rock stars. So,
I don't think twice when I'm ordering a drink now. Because I know I probably got the $20 to buy myself and my friend a drink when I need it. That's nice.
Here they are, Green Day.
And a burrito.
Of course. Why not go for the beans and rice? Moving up from 10 to 7. It's Boulevard of Broken Dreams on AT40.
I walk a lonely road.
American Top 20.
Hi, Hi, this is Kasem. Last week, Green Day spent a ninth week at number 1 with Boulevard of Broken Dreams, which means their dream year is continuing. So far this year, they've earned a Grammy. They've scored with a number 1 CD and a number 1 song. Will that song reward them with a 10th week at the top as well? We'll find out as we count down all the hottest hits in the USA on American Top 20 from the premier radio networks.
Counting down the hits with Kasem.
Every week we count down the week's top hits by the world's top stars on American Top 20. Down a notch to number 10, here's Green Day, a band whose guitar player, Billie Joe Armstrong, was once asked to define punk rock. So he stood up, walked over to a garbage can, and kicked it over. He said, "Okay, that's punk rock." Then he picked up the garbage can and kicked it again. And he said, "Now, that's not punk rock. That's a trend." Here's Green Day with Boulevard of Broken Dreams.
American Top 20.
From Hollywood, I'm Kasem. Extra. Well, now we're up to an American Top 20 Extra by Green Day, a band that played their first show for people more interested in ribs than riffs. It was back in the late 80s. Singer and guitar player Billie Joe Armstrong had formed a garage band called Sweet Children with his friend, bass player Mike Dirnt. Billie says, "We thought we were pretty good, but nobody would give us a shot." And then Billie Joe's mother came up with an idea. She worked as a waitress at a barbecue restaurant in Vallejo, California called Rod's Hickory Pit. She thought Rod might let them play on Saturday nights as long as it didn't cost him any money. And she was right. Rod said that as long as they didn't chase customers away, they could try playing a few songs. Billie Joe says, "We figured most people were there for the food, but nobody complained, and we got a free meal out of it. The worst part was that afterwards, everything smelled like smoke. I mean everything, even our instruments." Now, with an extra, here's Green Day from 2005 with Wake Me Up When September Ends.
Wake me up when September ends. Counting them down with Kasem.
Now we're up to an American Top 20 Extra by Green Day, a band whose bass player, Mike Dirnt, took his name from a sound he used to make. Michael Pritchard grew up loving the bass. Quote, "Everyone else wanted to play lead guitar, but for me, the bass was it. The bass is always there underneath it all." Michael spent lots of time practicing at home, and when he was at school, he'd play air bass guitar. While he played, Michael made a sound. He'd go, "Dun dun 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 dun." He was famous for his dirts, and so when it came time for a stage name, he became Mike Dirnt. Here's Mike and Green Day with an extra from 1998, Time of Your Life. With an AT20 extra from 1998, that's Green Day and Time of Your Life.
Casey's Coast to Coast.